So to do that, I'm going to break this down into 4 sections, and they are promoting your live stream, which Freya will be talking about. Obviously, if you're going to put a lot of effort and time and thought into what you're going to stream, you'll need to make sure that people are watching. So Freya's going to give you her top tips for that. I'm going to be talking about what your live stream is going to consist of. And by that, I don't so much mean the content, as in what you're going to be physically doing in the live stream. I'm going to talk about more about if it's going to be recorded content that you're presenting as live, which is what some people have been doing, or if it's going to be any extra features that you might need to consider when you're planning to make that stream. And then I'm going to talk about how you're going to stream it. So what service you're going to use to do that. And then I'm going to pass over to Yannick, who's going to talk about testing it and making sure that everything goes technically according to plan in the best possible way. So let's talk about what it's going to consist of. So something a lot of our clients are doing at the moment is presenting recorded content as if it's live. So basically they're recording things in advance, making sure that they've got it nicely edited, and then setting up a stream at a specific date and time, presenting it as if it's currently happening. Alternatively, you can do things, actually physically live, but obviously that gives you a bit of room for error, but it is, much more immersive, and it's the benefit of it being in real time. So just to consider that, and if your needs are complex around this, for example, you might want to move from a pre-recorded video into a live stream, or perhaps the other way around, you might need to look at something called an encoder, and that is essentially broadcasting software. So there's a really nice free tool called Open Broadcast Software, which we're going to share in the chat in just a second. And essentially, because it's broadcasting software, it allows you to layer things onto your video stream, which will be sort of a sign language, or perhaps doing those complex streaming features. So the next thing to consider would be where you're going to actually stream it. Whether you're going to do that via your own website, whether you're going to use a white label company or a third party. So the 3 differences there are, if you're going to be doing it directly on your main website, you need to make sure that you're streaming, your servers are set up to do streaming specifically, because they're quite heavy files and it's going to be taking a lot of bandwidth. So that is just something to consider, that you need to make sure your servers are at capacity. Alternatively, white labeling, so using things like YouTube and Vimeo or any other party service, and linking them into your website is a much safer option, because those things are specifically set up to manage large-scale live stream events. And then the other option would be third party. So that would be just using Vimeo or YouTube or another party like that, and not having it on your website at all. Then I think we should consider things like music. So if you're going to be using music in any way, shape or form during or as part of your live stream, it's really important to consider if you have the rights to do that. So just checking in with the PRS licensing authority, making sure that you have the correct permissions, or you've paid the rights to use that music. And this brings me nicely on to my next point, which is protection of digital assets and access restrictions. So if you don't have the right PRS license for that music, you're going to need to think of ways that you can block that thing from happening. For example, if you don't have it the right to play a specific song in Spain, how are you going to stop Spanish users listening to that song or watching your stream? And that's something that you might need to consider using geo-blocking, and that's a feature that we're seeing more and more of, and it's definitely something that we can help with. That also ties into digital, you're putting a lot of time and effort into creating content in your stream. So you're essentially creating a digital asset, and you might want to remarket that stream once it's happened. So to do that, you just want to consider whether that's going to be completely free to access, or whether you're going to make sure that people can't download it. And a lot of these streaming providers have things and tools built in to stop this happening. But it's just something to consider, whether you're wanting how private you want the stream or the experience to be. Then there's also additional features that might be nice to have when you're streaming. So for example, Music in the Round use a chat box, which we coded in for them. And that's just a really nice feature where it was part of a music festival, and people could sort of chime in and say how much they're enjoying it, or what they were looking forward to next. And that's, or perhaps give them a bit more information about what's happening in the stream, or Q&A with the musicians, for example. So there's also Q&As and polls that are offered by Vimeo, but just audience interaction so that it's not just a stream is something you might want to consider. Finally, tracking. How are you going to measure the success of your stream? So usually Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager are the way to do this. Other bespoke platforms or custom solutions may come with tracking abilities built in, but it's important to consider what you actually want to measure and how you're going to measure it. So the gist of this sort of section, the what section, is really just to make sure that your chosen platform supports your needs. And to make the best way to do this is to sort of make a checklist and go through it. And Meg's going to be sharing that checklist at the end of this section. So that brings us to how. What are we going to use to stream when you're streaming your event or your performance or whatever you're going to stream? How do we choose the right provider? So it should come as no surprise to you. The two main big players here are YouTube and Vimeo. And they're both completely valid options. The reason I say that is because they're specifically set up for video hosting, for live streaming. They've got an incredible amount of money and team behind them. So they are the front runners for a reason. It also takes the hosting problem away from your website. It makes sure that they're managing the video content so that there's not going to be any strain on your servers. And the questions around the differences between these are quite large. To use streaming specifically on Vimeo, you have to pay for a premium subscription, but then you get a lot more customizability and privacy options. So this topic about which is better, YouTube or Vimeo, is a huge one all by itself, and there's been a lot of consideration in the projects that we've been working on over which one to go for, depending on the right requirements. So to break that down a bit easier, we've also created a sort of comparison document, and Meg's going to share another blog that we found. But I do encourage you to have a look at the comparison document that we have on our website at the end of this section. What if you don't want to use YouTube or Vimeo? What else is out there? So one thing we're seeing a lot at the moment is simulcast, which is basically using Twitter or Facebook Live, LinkedIn, Twitch. There are a lot of the social media platforms are using a lot. They built their own live streaming features into them, and you might want to consider streaming to them at the same time so that you're streaming on Vimeo, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all at the same time. So that's one option. And there's another article from HubSpot, which we can share in the chat. I see Meg's going to do it in just a second. Then you can think about custom bespoke options. So BookTix Now and TicketCo are the sort of front runners here. They are quite expensive, to be honest. But if you're looking for an all-in-one solution where it manages your ticketing, your booking system, your privacy restrictions, all these sort of things, and the streaming itself, these are probably worth a look into. Alternatively, there is plugins for WordPress, and as we're WordPress specialists, this is something that we can help with, and we're looking into using more and more ourselves. So these are WP Stream and Cloudinary, and these do broadly the same thing, but because they're plugins to WordPress, there's an awful lot of customizability that we can bring to there. So that is the end of my section. I just want to encourage you to have a look at those two documents that I mentioned, which we'll be sharing now, it's sort of nowish, and invite any questions about this section.
So thanks, Ben. Yeah, there's the handouts that you've done, which are now available on our website, are really good. So are useful resources, I think. So do jump along there if you get a chance. We've had a question from Matt. This is I always say that we are not legal experts, so I'm not sure whether we can answer this question, because it's quite specific about PRS. So if you pay PRS for music content in a live stream upload to YouTube, why doesn't this link to YouTube's algorithm for blocking music content?
Why doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the answer to that is YouTube does use algorithms, and it's kind of a leap of faith on your part. If they find that you're using unlicensed music, they will take you down. But that is a leap of faith. You know, it's up to you. It depends how long your stream is going to be as well. If it's going to be a 10-hour stream, the likelihood that the algorithm will find it is higher than if it's 10 minutes. So yeah, it's just a thing to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Chance for any more questions if you've got any more questions on Ben's section here. But if not, I just had a question. Maybe you could just talk a little bit more about planning in advance for these things.
Yes, of course. I mean, sorry, was that for Yannick or for me?
Did I get? I thought that was for you.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just really to consider the things I've talked about, which are, you know, tracking and deciding which streaming provider you're going to go with, and yeah, just thinking about not only the content of what you're going to be doing in the stream, but also then how you're going to be streaming it, who your audience are going to be, what you want them to take away from it, how they're going to engage with it, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. Brilliant, thanks, Ben. Yannick, do you want to pick it up from there?
Great. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to go through video content and live streaming. So basically things to prepare for, things to do to help you for the day and serving that content smoothly. And the smoother that you can serve that content, the better the experience for the user and the smoother the overall festival or event will go. So there's two key areas that I want to consider. So that's support. So that's support on the day, so technical support, and then customer support to the user. And then I'll move on to content and streaming. So this will be content as in pre-recorded content, or if you want to take the leap and go for live streaming and some top tips for live streaming on the day. So support. So basically, support is the network that you have around you or the preparation that you have before the day. And in general, I think Hans says it really well that if you're doing a theatre show, you normally have a stage manager, you have ushers, you have box office. You have a lot of support around you to make sure that that show runs smoothly. And we found basically for online and live streaming, it's good to have that kind of support in place as well, just to have that people power behind it. So if you've got, the first one I want to flag is technical support. So this is who do you call? How do you contact someone if something unexpected happens on the website? So for instance, if the server goes down, if suddenly the YouTube video or whatever video that you're doing isn't playing properly and you're getting a lot of calls, what communication do you have with a developer in order to fix that? For instance, when I've been on call for live streams, I'm normally there ready watching the live stream, and I've got another developer and I've got a clear communication just to make sure that things run, just in case. Most of the time it runs fine, but just in case, you want to have that support there. So technical support as well. So if you are doing live streaming, how does a live streamer get in contact with you if they're having any problems? So for instance, if they can't log in, if they're running late, or if anything unexpected is happening, what kind of communication channels do you have that person can communicate with you? And then what communication do you have to then say to the user, well, that's the next one, to say to the user how that something's gone wrong or something is happening? Are you going to email them? Are you going to change something on the website? Are you going to do something just to say to them, sorry, we're running a little bit late and we'll be back in a minute? Or how are you going to communicate that? So customer support. So how can users contact you? So this will be, if they're having trouble, how they're going to get in contact with you. So like Ben was saying, we've had live chat features in place where they can literally just chat on the page. Other solutions we've had is that you can get contact via Twitter or email or telephone. So how can users get in contact with you? And in general, have you got a FAQ or instructions to view? So to view this, you need to be viewing it on Google Chrome, or you need to be viewing it on Safari, or it can just be as simple as click this link to view. Have you got an FAQ for if things go wrong? And in general, this is what we call first line technical help, which in simple terms is just have you turned it on and off again? But in general, this can fix a lot of problems. So first line technical support will be things like clear your cache, update your browser, check your firewalls, restart the computer. And in general, this is going to fix a lot of stuff. So just being ready to take someone through that process, just being ready to speak someone through how to clear their cache, or having a link ready, or having an FAQ link ready. Because in general, normally when you build a platform, it's going to work for 95% of the people. The 5% that it doesn't work for, they're going to be the ones that call. So those are the people you have to prepare for, and just be ready to take them through this kind of support process. So in general, it's just having a plan, having people behind you to support things to go smoothly. And I think the theater example that you've got box office, you've got the stage manager, all these things are really important. So just having someone that's dedicated, that's going to be checking the user contact, someone that's going to be ready to call the developer if something goes wrong. Because in general, it's going to go right, but smoothing those things over will serve the content in a way, and then it'll just support the festival and the event. I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's any questions at the moment. Hans, have any questions come in on that so far?
Yeah, well, we had a good question from Gillian, which Ben has responded to, about combining live and pre-recorded. So, e.g., a screening followed by a live answer session. And I know we've done a little bit of that, and actually we didn't do that with Spittlefields, did we? That was all pre-recorded. And I know we've been talking about it with Fuel as well, haven't we? But yeah, so Ben, what did you respond to that question?
Yeah, so that's where the encoder comes in, because that's where you can layer content or move from certain videos into other live streams, or vice versa in the same stream or channel. So that's where the encoder comes in. And Vimeo has that built in on the premium service. Alternatively, you can use one directly with YouTube or another streaming platform, but OBS is the open broadcasting software, though there are lots of others.
And it just reminded me, for Create Day, which was a one-day global event run by London Craft Week, we coded something bespoke for them where they mixed up pre-recorded YouTube videos with live stream as well, I seem to remember. Okay, any more questions before we move on at this moment?
Even if we move on, just keep throwing the questions in, and we'll come back and we'll come back and answer them. And we've got people manning the chat as well, so keep the questions coming. So moving on to content creation. So this is live streaming and pre-recorded. So we always advise to have a content brief, which basically means how are you going to receive the content, and making sure you receive it in an expected way. So this is for pre-recorded content and also for live streamers. But I'll just populate these just so we can have a look to see what these are. So basically, if you're doing pre-recorded content, what device does the content creator need to film from? Is it important? If they're doing it from a mobile, do they need to film it this way, or do they need to film it this way? Do they need to send it? Do they need to send it via email? Do they need to put it on Dropbox or cloud storage and then send you the link? Do they upload it to YouTube and send you the URL? Basically, all these things are, if you're receiving it in an expected way, it's easier for you to serve that content. If you've got one or two events going on, or one or two artists creating content, or content creators creating content, then it's easy to be able to be flexible and change and work with those artists. But when you can't really scale this. When you get to receiving 200-300 pieces of content, if someone's sending you via email, if someone's sending you a link, if someone's sending you on Dropbox, it can get very hard to find where that information is and convert it into what it needs to be so that it can go on the platform. And then if anything needs to change, again, that information's in many different places, so it could be hard to actually change any of that. So just receiving this in an expected way means that then you can serve that content and smooth the viewing experience. And it'll also save on admin time. So if they need to upload it to a platform, just making sure that they know which platform to go to. If it's an intro or an outro that needs to be added to the video, for instance, we've had it that they wanted to have a logo at the beginning, a logo at the end, which meant that the content creator had to send something and then add in this logo at the end at the beginning, or are you going to add it in? Are there any specific format considerations to take in place? Does the audio need to be taken off? Does it need to be a certain size? And then in terms of timing, is there a certain timing that it needs to be? So in general, just having this brief will make it so that you know what kind of content is coming in. And in general, the tighter the brief, the less flexibility for the content creator. But a looser brief will make it harder to build a reliable platform. So for example, if you're serving only YouTube videos, then you only have to build for YouTube. And that means that you can take more time to develop the chat features, the user experiences, and the user interfaces. But if you're serving content from mobile phones and YouTube and custom players and podcasts, it can be done, but it just means that you have to put more time into making sure that that works across all devices and for audiences, and you can spend less time in the other features. And in general, I would say have at least something that I have at least a content brief of something, as in we want a video, or we want an image, or we want a podcast, or we want you to stream from Instagram.
Great, thank you, Yannick.
So,
forward for questions at that. Sorry, have I got to the right point?
Yeah, absolutely. Always, I see there's one in the chat. I will have a look. Actually, it's just someone saying thank you to Ben. Beautiful. Thank you, Ben. So keep the questions coming in if you've got them. So going live. So if you are going to do the plunge and go for live streaming, here's a couple of top tips or considerations basically to take in place. So it's 3 things: device and framing, lighting, and then sound. So for framing, what does the viewer need to see? So in general, if what they need to see, you want to put the focus on that. It can be different when you're looking at group dynamics and group pieces and serving art. But in general, if you're presenting content, you take into consideration what the viewer needs to see. So for instance, in this webinar format, we've put our framing that we're very close to the camera so you can see our facial expressions and moving. In general, I've got an example for if you're serving a single person. I'm just going to take the microphone out so you can just hear it, microphone change. But in general, if you're looking if you're serving a single person in the frame, you want to make sure that you're not too small on the screen and not too far away. So the general guidelines are a little bit of space above your head and pretty much to your knees at the bottom. The reason being that if you're very big on the screen, you begin to cut out bits of content. It can be difficult to get yourself in framing, especially if you're animating and moving. And then if you're very small, it can get difficult to see the details. So I'll put the microphone back in. So in general, just taking into consideration what the viewer needs to see. And with that, you want to make sure you have a good contrast of your background. It just helps to pick out easier the movement of what's going on in front of you. Lighting, front lit, which is the light coming this way, is better than backlit. Backlit, it's like driving into the sun. It can get difficult to see into the camera, whereas front lit, you're lighting the content. So this can be simple. This can just be, I've put my light on at the front here, and that's giving me a bit of light here. Or you can have a lamp, just point the lamp at you. It doesn't need to be a high-tech thing. It can just be where you're putting, for instance, I have a window here, so I'm not putting that behind me. Sound, so this is microphone placement. So for this, in general, you want it as close to the where you're producing the sound as possible. If you get too close, I'll show you here, you begin to hear the breath against the microphone. So it's finding the balance that you're close, but not too close. You can also use things like earphones if you're moving around, so that then you can be close to your, I'm just going to double check. Can you still hear me? Because I think that might have changed my, okay, no, we're back. It likes to automatically connect to my Bluetooth headphones, which is great, but not when I'm just trying to show it. So in general, you want to have the microphone so where you're projecting to, that you're picking up the sound here. So if you are live streaming, to be projecting like this is easy. And then framing it, you can get harnesses where you look at it, but in general, having an arm's length allows you to be in focus and in screen. And then the big thing is to test it. Make sure you do a close test. So try it from the device you're going to stream from. What I mean is, don't try it from the device that someone's giving you to with it logged in. Try it on your own device. Make sure it's working. Make sure you've gone through the login process and know what it looks like, and go through it alone. Because I've done a few live streams and it feels very different when you're logging in, and then things look slightly different and it's hard to find the live stream or where you need to be doing it. So make sure you go through. And then in this case, you can test out what happens when you go wrong. So you can test out sending out a message, or at this point, I'm going to call you. So have someone on a different line. I've done it where you have someone on the phone and you say, does it look okay? Is the lighting okay? Can you hear me okay? Basically, just make sure, apologies, you're going to go through the process just so you get comfortable with the system. And then remember, things can still go wrong. And it's okay. Just make sure you keep a cool head, take your time to get it right, and have someone to help you. If you're working in a small team, it can be as simple as just having someone else in a different location, or having someone else on a different device, so that they can handle the messaging to the user, where you can just sort out what's going wrong. And if worse comes to worse, you can cancel and reschedule. Normally, users understand that there can be technical difficulties, and they're willing to wait for content. So I went to see Romber's Draw From Within, a beautiful piece. I remember that the first night the servers crashed, so nobody could come watch it, but they rescheduled, and over 2,000 people came back. And they had a clear way of communicating that had happened. And we had something similar when we were running Spitalfields Music. I think it got delayed in the end by about 3 to 7 minutes. It was basically a TV-like experience where it just ran from one into the other, and one of them got delayed. So we just updated the schedule and let everybody know that it's just running. I think it was about 5 minutes in the end late, and users were willing to stay. But if people don't know, then what happens is that they think something's gone wrong, they refresh, they leave, then you got the dissatisfied experience. So in general, just having things in place to help you smooth the experience will allow you to serve the content, and then it will be a smooth festival and event for all the users that come. Oh yeah, I put here and more because I'm sure you all have stories of things that went wrong, and how I think at a lot of times it can be quite exciting how people handle it. So I'll come back and see if there's any questions so far.
There's no questions, but do put your questions in the chat box if you think of it.
I can't hear anyone. I'm just going to change my. I'm back.
Yeah, mate. Can you hear me though?
Yep.
So there's no questions in the chat box, but I was encouraging people to put questions if they've got any. But maybe this is a chance to check in with Lydia's question about the balance between us working with larger groups, but whether what we're saying is still applicable to smaller teams or solo teams even. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, yeah. So in general, for smaller teams, I would say for my section, in terms of the content brief, have a tighter content brief. So receive stuff in a way that you know it's coming to you. And that way you don't have to build for so many different things going in different places. And then for support, if you're a solo team, possibly it would be having 2 different devices. So having your phone and your laptop. So if a laptop crashes, you can go onto your phone and use your data in order to change anything. But if you can, to work with someone in a 2-person team would be ideal, because then you could delegate the support to the second person, and then you can just worry about the content.
Yeah, and from my section, I'd echo that. If you are, we've all seen, YouTubers and influencers who are solo teams, but they're generally putting out content that's pre-recorded, and then I bet that if they were live, they'd probably have some sort of support or backup during that process. But certainly the planning section, in terms of deciding what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, I think that's all still fairly valid. It may just be that you have less needs if you're a solo team.
And Lisa asks here, are there any guidelines for length of video streaming, especially independent artist producers, i.e. not run there? So are there any guidelines for lengths of video streaming?
If you are talking about the actual length of the duration of the stream, I'd say that's probably up to you, but I'd just be mindful that if it's too long, you may lose viewers along the way. However, if it's pre-recorded content that is presented as live, you may need to check the limits of the file size of what you can upload to that stream when you're streaming it.
For particularly long events, what we've done is we've had sections of events, and then people could come to specific sections. And then in terms of the way we served that content, we then allowed it to be, or the client, that they allowed it to be viewable for 14 days afterwards. So it can be the way that you're presenting the festival as well can support the length of what you're doing.
And I guess that nicely ties into what Freya's going to touch on in a second, which is repurposing your content. And so, for example, Music in the Rounds festival, which happened last week, is completely available to watch until the end of May. And that's an automatic process that's come through Vimeo and YouTube Premiere.
Freya, I could see you were about to say something.
Yeah, we have another question as well, but I don't know whether it might be best now for me to just lead into my section now, where we're going to look at digital marketing. But Anthony, I've got your question, and we can come to that at the end, definitely. So now I'm going to explore marketing and repurposing your content. Using digital marketing is a great way to generate interest and signups to your streaming event. And we recommend posting regularly across your social media channels to promote your stream. And to make sure that you attract and engage audiences, we've got some key areas that you can focus on. So just the next slide, please, Meg. Thanks. And then, so the first point is to utilize your social media platforms. So establish the best way to use each of your social media platforms to promote your event. So we know Facebook is great for detailed information and is often where audiences go to be informed. So you could create something like a Facebook event. Instagram is where audiences tend to go to be inspired. So the messaging here should focus on catching your audience's attention alongside visually engaging content. And Twitter is a great place for quick updates and developing conversation around your streaming event or your live stream. Finally, LinkedIn is a great platform to connect with other organizations and businesses and kind of encourage them to either attend or to promote your live stream too. The next point is hashtags. So developing a unique hashtag for your event and encouraging others to use this hashtag in their social media posts too. So creating a hashtag for your event is a great way to encourage audiences to interact with your content online, and also can just spread the word about your stream or your pre-recorded event on social media. Thirdly, it's really important to think about your messaging. So be sure that your social media captions have a real clear messaging and include all the key details about the stream and what it involves. So what can audiences expect from the stream? When, where, and how can they access the stream content? And be sure to include any links to where audiences may need to register or buy a ticket, or to even just find out more about what the stream involves. Key kind of questions to consider here are things like, do people need to buy a ticket? Is it free? Is it going to be live? And also, are audiences able to rewatch it at a later date? So if they do sign up but then can't attend, is it going to be available for audiences to catch up with? The fourth point is engaging content. So as I've mentioned before, platforms like Instagram are led by visual content. So you should develop and create some engaging assets to promote your stream on social media. For instance, things like bite-sized trailers can really help build anticipation and excitement for an event. Also things like countdowns, GIFs, and animated videos. So when we worked with Create Day, which was a London Craft Week event, and it was a 24-hour event that basically was a mixture of both live streams and pre-recorded content from across the world. We created some different kind of assets, or shared different assets on their social media platforms, which basically counted down. So we had like a week countdown and then 24-hour countdown. And again, that was just a really great way to promote the event, but also to build anticipation and excitement for that content. Next, it's really important to consider advertising, and if it is possible and you have the budget, it's definitely worth adding some spend to your social media campaign to promote your streaming event. Using things like Facebook ads or Google ads, you can create a targeted campaign directed to audiences that you want to reach, with the aim to encourage them to click through to your event or your website. To make the most out of your ad spend, we would encourage using split tests, testing things like audiences and content to see what works best, and then channeling the majority of your budget to those best performing ads. The next point to look at is email marketing or newsletters. So it's also worth conducting an email campaign to remind your subscribers of any streaming events that you might be hosting. Not only is it worth kind of emailing them well in advance to encourage signups or registration, but then also following up nearer the time to remind those who have registered. So often we find that with events, particularly if you have just kind of, you know, you're putting on a free event and people haven't had to pay to join, people can sign up and then forget, and weeks later they forget what they've signed up to. So making sure that you kind of follow up with those registrants, just, you know, 24 hours before or a couple of days before, just to encourage them to actually attend the event. Then there's outreach. So to help push your message out further, we recommend running an outreach campaign. And we spoke a little bit about this in our previous webinar, but this basically involves building out a seeding list with industry contacts and relevant peers who could help share information about your campaign, about your stream, and on their social media platforms, help you reach their audiences too. So sending out a clear email with suggested social media copy and content to encourage those other industry peers to share your streaming event and to kind of reach a wider audience as possible. The next kind of section that I'm going to look at here is how you can utilize your social media platforms on the day of the stream. And that's all about being responsive. So it's really important to be active and available on social media on the day of your stream, and be ready to respond to things like comments and messages, like posts, and also share any posts. So as I mentioned before, we supported London Craft Week to promote their event Create Day, which was, as I mentioned, a 24-hour online event that streamed both pre-recorded and live material from across the world. And during this event, we monitored their social media platforms over that 24-hour period. So we always made sure that someone was available to respond to any comments, to share the post, to reply to any direct messages. And as Yannick touched on in his section, this could be a great way for, if there are any kind of technical difficulties, being responsive on social media, being ready to reply to your audiences if they have any questions or if they have any issues. Is a really great way to utilize your social media platforms on the day of streaming. And finally, we're going to look at how, once you have streamed your event and the material, and you've kind of put that content out there, that it shouldn't just be discarded. So repurposing that material. And it's kind of great to view your streamed events as a way of developing evergreen content that you can reuse and repurpose at a later date. So for instance, in 2019, our client Dance Consortium, who tour international dance companies from across the UK, created an online masterclass with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre Company. And initially the masterclass was streamed live. However, it remained on their YouTube channel for audiences to revisit at a later date if they wanted to. And then obviously in 2020, at the beginning of the year, all of their tours were cancelled due to COVID. So we were kind of looking for content that we could use on their social media platforms that could keep audiences engaged and to kind of keep producing content for audiences or releasing content for audiences that they could enjoy during that period where touring couldn't happen. So we looked at their masterclass and we decided to reuse it for World Dance Day. So we encouraged audiences to watch and take part on World Dance Day at a certain time. And the YouTube video of the masterclass saw a huge increase in views. And we noted that just before World Dance Day, the video had 12,096 views, and now it's increased to 16,700 views, with 2,305 of those views being on World Dance Day. So we also found that during that week alone, we gained 51 new subscribers. And due to the Ailey Masterclass, the views had increased by 31%. So this was a really great way of showing how that by repurposing that content and giving it a new lease of life by attaching it to a marketing day, we were able to boost the views on that piece of content and also gain some new subscribers to the YouTube channel too. So it's always worth looking at what content you've created and what streams you've created that you could then potentially reuse at a later date.
Great, thank you, Freya. And I guess repurposing is a great word to use there. I guess the other word that comes to my mind is thinking about how evergreen your content, and that's another word that's used so that it's not sort of time specific, that you can then repurpose it afterwards if it's thought through in that kind of way as well.
Yeah.
So thank you to the team for preparing all of those and sharing those learnings with you, and also thank you to Meg, who I didn't mention at the beginning, is helping make things go smoothly on this webinar. We've now got some time for questions, so we'd love to hear your questions. We've got one I saw that one from David, which we'll come back to in a moment. I just had one question for Freya. Are there other platforms that we can experiment with in terms of live streaming that you might want to sort of mention from your point of view?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously I'm looking at it from the social media lens. So we've definitely worked with clients using social media platforms to produce live content and to stream live content. So particularly things like Facebook and Instagram, where they're kind of really great platforms for producing and live streaming quite easily. Similar to how Ben and Yannick kind of spoke before, it's when we kind of approach either creating live content for Instagram or Facebook, it's very much so a similar process in that testing again is the best way to kind of feel comfortable with going live on social media and to get the most out of your live session. So setting up test accounts on Instagram to just have a practice run through, and just giving that time for any hosts to kind of go through being live on the platform and things like that, is obviously key. Other things to consider with social media is things like Facebook. You can obviously save the video then, so it lives on your Facebook page. So again, it's that idea of having that evergreen content that you can repurpose potentially at a later date. And also the same with Instagram. You can now save your live streams onto an IGTV channel, which is on your which is next to basically where your main feed is on the platform. So you again can repurpose that content at a later date. But they're both great ways of kind of supporting your social media campaigns, and they're really helpful for beating algorithms and gaining engagement and just connecting with your followers on those platforms in a real-time situation.
And while you're talking, Freya, Teresa's question seems quite relevant here as well. So paid advertising, could you explain split tests a bit more?
Yeah, so with paid advertising, particularly on Facebook, you can do something called A to B testing. So if you have Facebook Ads Manager, which if you've got a business page, then that's completely free. You can use Ads Manager for free, and obviously you have to pay to set up the ads, but the actual platform itself you can just use. And basically, when you are setting up an ad, you have an option to use this A to B split testing. And there you can select things, either your audiences, or you can select the asset that you're using. And what it will do is it will basically split the budget between either, the two different audiences or the two different pieces of content, whether it's like you're testing an image and video, and it will basically run a test to see which one works out. So it will spend the same amount of money on each, and then from the end of the campaign it will let you know which ad has performed better and what which audience or piece of content has performed better. So you might want to start off by using a small budget on each, seeing what works best, and then applying the rest of your budget to the best performing ad.
Great, thank you, Freya. Thank you for that. David had quite a technical question, actually. Is there a preference between progressive and interlace pictures?
In general, David, it's going to be the progressive are going to be running smoother. But then it depends on the platform you're serving from. They might not, it depends on how high definition they will then serve that. But normally, if you're using something like YouTube or Vimeo, the users can choose that for themselves if they're using 420p or 1080i.
David, I hope that answers your question. Thank you. And then we've had other questions are starting to come in. So Sasha, you've got a question. How would you recommend going live on two platforms at once, say YouTube and Instagram? Would you have two different cameras and shoot simultaneously?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. You don't need to do two different cameras. That's a feature called simulcast, which is supported by Vimeo, and you'll be able to stream through YouTube and Instagram at the same time. You just have to connect them up. There may also be integrations which are third parties from YouTube to Instagram Live. So I'd encourage you to just have a quick Google and find some of those. But I don't believe it's native to YouTube. So it may be an add-on that you have to go and find. That's if you're using YouTube, whereas you could use Vimeo and then it would all be in one. So it just depends where you're starting your stream from. If it's from YouTube, you'll have to look for add-ons. If it's from Vimeo, it's just a matter of connecting them up. But yeah, I'd avoid using two different cameras.
Great, thank you, Ben. And Leon Kennedy, I hope I pronounced that right. We used YouTube for hosting classes, but apart from number of views, couldn't capture any other information. So contacts, etc. Okay, yeah. Is there a way to do this so we can stay connected?
So it depends what you mean by contacts. If you're talking about, people that have an account with you, then I think you're best off putting it behind a login system and just embedding the YouTube video behind it. That way you can monitor who's logged into your site and viewed that page using Google Analytics. You could also look in to see if there's any Google Analytics integrations with YouTube. There should be some tools out there, but they may, because they're both owned by Google, so there should be a way to get them to talk to each other. But it really does depend what you mean by contacts information.
And I'm assuming that you are talking about the ways that you can then stay in touch with the people through marketing. So that what you say, Ben, about the login system is the solution that we are working through with a few of our clients, including Fuel Theatre particularly, and I remember with Spitalfields as well. But I know that's a little bit more advanced. So it's not necessarily the sort of solution that the independent people may have budgets for. So I know that if you've got a website and you've got a login system, we are sort of spending a bit of time to customize those websites, particularly in WordPress, for those clients who want that. I don't know if there's an easier way, other than maybe using things like Eventbrite and those sorts of things, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, again, so Eventbrite actually has an integration with Vimeo. I keep banging on about Vimeo, but I really love Vimeo. I think its service is great. But yeah, so then the problem with that is that Eventbrite would have the page. So I guess if you're an independent artist, it may be great to have the Vimeo integrated into your Eventbrite booking, and then you can monitor all the clicks from there. But I was actually going to say it might be if you're doing classes specifically, that might be something you want to look into, sort of a booking system for. So for example, with Greenwich Dance, we researched and found an integrated book when which is a system that can also monetize classes over Zoom and YouTube and all the rest of the streaming platforms. So if it's a case of mailing list and all that sort of stuff, a booking system is probably your answer there.
Great, thank you, Ben. And Steve Cridge has a question. We've created our own website platform and are using Vimeo's embeddable chat for audience interactions. Is anyone using any other chat? We're finding the Vimeo option all right, but a bit limited, particularly the Q&A part. Now, I know I'm pretty sure we've done some research into chat systems as well, haven't we?
Yes, so there is I'd like to know what you're finding limited about it. It's definitely I agree it does have limits, but it depends on your needs. So there's just the chat feature. There's also polls and Q&As that you can set up through it, but it does take a bit of effort to go and set them all up, and sometimes they might not work as expected. YouTube also offers a chat, but again, that is just a chat feature. We custom coded a chat plugin into Music in the Round site, but that's what they wanted to. Well, it was just a chat. Other plugins native to WordPress are paid. There are some. There's one called Rumble Talk, for example. So there are other options out there. But if you're trying to integrate the chat into a Vimeo stream, that may be slightly difficult to do, and you may have to get a developer to assist with that.
Great. David has a follow-up. We always provide a backup in case. Sorry, my last question went wrong. Shall I give you a chance, David, to rephrase it then, or?
Sending a recording uplink.
In general, while you upload or change the question, we normally use things like caching, which is temporary storage, and then that serves the content. In terms of backing up streaming, in terms of an error, that would be how I would answer that. But when the next one comes in, we can go over again.
And Courtney has a question. We have done a few live streams through Zoom and then linking this through to stream on YouTube. Do you have any advice for streaming live music? We've found when we try to share vocals and instruments, we have issues with the sound picking one option and we can't find a way to blend them together.
I think you're best off finding an audio technician. It's quite difficult to balance. It depends on the mic. It depends on a number of things, which is why it's tricky. So it depends on the microphones that people have got, especially if you're all in different places. It depends on how they're using the microphones, as Yannick demonstrated earlier on. It depends on where it's being fed into. It depends how the levels are balanced out. So I'd advise to find an audio technician for that.
I'm going to pause the questions there now because I just realised we're running out of time.